Welcome back to my video. I'm going to take these thrifted items and upcycle them into something pretty that would go in your home. These old signs, when they have writing on them, you want to make sure you sand them. When you sand these boards, you want to make sure that, especially with the cutting boards, that you get all of that kitchen grime off of them, all them germs. This kitchen board right here, I sanded it a lot and it is really smooth and down to the bare wood. That one I might restore. These other kitchen boards, I just sanded them down. They're no longer good enough for kitchen boards, cutting boards, so we're gonna give them a new purpose. These little signs that had words on them, you wanna make sure that you sand them down so those words come either completely off or the rough edges come off. Because if you paint over the top of those words, you will see it underneath. So make sure you get down to the base of those little signs. I'm going to use DIY paint in the color Old School. I have this can. I really do like this black color. And when we put some other wording on here, it'd be really nice to have it in the bright white. I have the new DIY paintbrush in the Little Dipper. And I'm gonna just go ahead and paint these items with the Old School paint. I'm going to do what people call batch painting. So I set aside all of these items that I want to be old school. So I'm gonna paint them all old school at the same time and speed this process up a bit. For this board, it's a really dark red. And when I took that wording off, it really didn't sand off completely. So I wanna make sure that this is all hidden. So I'm gonna use some Saltwash. So we're gonna put some of the chalk paint into the container. I use a really scruffy brush when I do this because I don't wanna ruin my good brushes. Then I have a product called Saltwash that I also sell on my website. And I'm gonna add some Saltwash into the paint, making it like a thick brownie batter. Then you're gonna take this thick paint and paint the face of your sign, making sure that you get like peaks and valleys to make it look like it was painted a long time ago. This is also very strong and durable, and you won't go back down to that red with adding the Saltwash into it. So I'm really getting some pretty rough brush strokes in here so that it makes it a little on the rough side. We're gonna put another color over the top and bring out some of those details. But you can go like this, which is called stippling, and that gives you some nice texture. If you want to do another fun finish, these three have the texture on them because I put the Saltwash inside the paint. Now, if you want another fun texture, you can take your Saltwash, dry Saltwash, and sprinkle it onto your item. Now take your mister bottle and mist it. Let it dry. The Saltwash is completely dried on here, and it does have, some of it'll still come off. That's okay. Now I'm going to spritz it again, taking my Perfectionist brush, and I'm gonna go right over the top. It's gonna drag some of that salt wash around. That's perfectly fine. This is vintage linen. You don't have to be real careful. You can just leave some spaces where they don't have any paint, because the end finish is going to give us that type of a look anyway. You're gonna let that dry. For this box, and I'm going to not wash my brush out. It still has the vintage linen on it, and I'm gonna go in with some Farm Fresh. And the magic of DIY paint is it's okay. You can blend those colors together and it works. See, there's a big glob of salt wash. You'll see what happens in the next step with that big glob. It's really cool. Same on this side. Very large glob of salt wash. We're gonna paint right over the top of it with Farm Fresh and a little bit of vintage linen. This is a really rough box. I think they must have had plants or something in it. That's what I thought it'd be good for, because it has a metal bottom. Just poke a few holes in there and stick some clay pots in with some plants and it'll be good. I'm gonna paint that edge in the Farm Fresh and it's done. After the salt wash and the paint have all dried, you're gonna take a spatula, metal, plastic, whichever you have on hand, and you're just gonna run over top of the salt wash where it was all chunky, and it's gonna pull back very easily. It's gonna release to that base coat. We don't wanna go back down to that red. So there we have some nice chunky, when we seal that, it's going to be the old school dark. Right now it's got a little bit of the dust on it. So we're gonna seal it and it's going to look old school dark. We'll do one where we had a little bit more chunk. See, there's a little bit more salt wash on there. So I'm just gonna pull that. See how that salt wash just flakes up and releases that base very easily in a random pattern, like it would be old. It's not anything that was planned. So it looks like it's been painted a long time ago. I'll speed this process up. I used painter's tape to tape off the top of this little stool into a farmhouse stripe. And I had to paint the first one and then mask again to paint those two small little stripes. After that was dry, I took the honey stencil that I had and I just stenciled that honeybee right onto the top of that little stool. I filled it in with the queen bee again. I got really messy this time, and you just go right back in with that black stencil, and then I added the words. On those long signs, I added some more stenciling work. I didn't do any slow movement for you because it is the same process over and over again. These stencils are from WallCutz, and I will link that below if you would like to order any of the WallCutz stamps or stencils. They are very, very good quality. I really do like using them. And I also put a link where you can get $5 off on your first order. So check the link below and you can get yourself some WallCutz. You can use them in many different ways. You don't have to use them for what they're intended to do. Some of these signs, there was a little bit on the edge that was too blank. So I went ahead and took some of the paint inlays that I had used, and I think I used them twice before. So they're gonna be really, really light. And you can see they got some yellow on them. I painted over the sign with the vintage linen paint again, and then spray them and let that sit on and dry. And I went right over top of that market, and you're gonna say, Connie, why did you do that? Well, you'll see at the end how I fixed that. But I wanted a little bit of the roses up there as well. And this didn't turn out as I had intended. So I'm like, I really hate using that paint. And I've seen people use the liquid patina before. So the next ones, I'm gonna try the liquid patina right here with you. So I went ahead and took that liquid patina and put it on the edges of my board with some of those same rose chintz paint inlay. This is the third time use on these guys, so it's going to be very, very thin, but it's okay. I wanted a more vintage look. And this way I don't have to paint with the same paint color over top of the stenciling that I've already done. This will save me a step if it actually works. So when you're putting that liquid patina on, you also want to mist them and let them dry. So I let them dry, not as long as I would paint. And I go ahead and give them a little bit of a misting. This first one is with the paint, and I pull that paint inlay back. Like I said, it's going to be very, very light, and it's very subtle. You can barely see it on camera, but you can see it in real life, the very subtleness. But that paint is, we're gonna fix that. And here's the one on the old school with the liquid patina. It works perfect. I really am very happy with the outcome. I think I might try to do some paint inlays first time use with using that liquid patina, because I really did like how that worked. So this honey box, I'm going to peel off these paint inlays. This one is really sweet. I don't know, I'm thinking I want to keep this box for myself because I really am liking it. And you can see that dirty grunge that we got on there from the Saltwash. When we use the liquid patina, it stays, and versus covering it up with some paint. So that was really good. We're gonna fix this one where I painted over the top of it. You just lay down that WallCutz stencil again, and you go ahead and you stencil right back over the top of all that white paint that you put. But using the liquid patina saves you this step. So this is an extra step that you don't have to do if you use the liquid patina. Anytime you use a stencil with DIY paint, you do also run the risk of smearing that white into that gray. So we're going to just take oh, and we also have a paint inlay on here. So we're gonna do the same thing. We're just gonna do a quick one-time brush, light brush over this area, and then let it dry. You also want to put Big Top over your transfers. Those won't smear. A transfer will not smear, but your stenciling may. So again, a very light touch. This is the tricky one when you have a whiteboard and you got black stenciling and also a paint inlay. So we're gonna seal it kind of just like a paint inlay and give it a first top coat to seal that, all of those pigments into the surface. And then when that dries, then we can make sure we have a really good coat. One more. I did want to wax this one, but I do not recommend waxing with the paint inlays. It'll smear it for sure. So we're going to still wax this one, but we're gonna go over with some Big Top first and let that dry, and then we'll go over with wax, and I'll show you that in a little bit. I'm going to wax a bunch of these that we had done. So this one I had put the top coat on already, so I could go over with some clear wax. I still want to use clear wax, before my dark wax because I want to make sure that I have a really good surface that this dark wax will come off. Actually, I'm using black wax. I want it to come off very well. So I wiped it off the first time with a clean cloth, and then it still was on there a little bit too dark for me. So I take another clean cloth and a fresh clean one, and I dip it into the clear wax, and then I move around on top of the black wax, and you can see it pulls some of that off again. It's like an eraser. So we're going to do the same thing with all of these different signs, is we're going to dark wax them and make them a little bit more aged. Now we're going to do this small little cutting board that I had in the Petticoat Pink DIY paint. We're just going to paint the entire thing with the DIY paint, giving it one good coat and then letting that coat dry. Whenever I use a paint inlay, I always want to make sure that I have one coat on there that is dried, and then I'll do a second coat and lay the paint inlay into the second coat. Doesn't matter if the first coat was a good coverage or not, I still like it to have one good coat. Of these I'm doing batch painting on again, so I'm painting them all with vintage linen. All right, something went wrong with the video when I put this on here, so I'm gonna give a recap of what I did. I took the paint inlay from IOD, the melange, and this one is sold out, but I do still have some on my website. It's the melange paint inlay. This is actual paint on this transfer paper, on this sheet of transfer paper. There are grid lines on the back side. When you put it down, you wanna make sure that the grid lines are facing you. So I put a coat of wet paint on this breadboard, this cutting board. I put a fresh coat of wet paint on here. I put the inlay down, and then I spritzed it with water. And now I'm gonna let it dry. I have another one. We're gonna put it on this breadboard that I painted in Petticoat Pink. So we have this one that's never been used before, which is good because that one had been used once already, and this one has not been used. I'm gonna cut it out. And it's gonna fit right on there. I've never been a fan of this bow on the bottom. So that's why it's been hard for me to use it. With this round, that bow is gonna be completely cut off. So I'm gonna like that. Now we're gonna take the Petticoat Pink and make a fresh coat of paint on this surface. I'm not gonna get in these recessed, I don't think. Maybe I will. So we'll paint them. I don't know how it's gonna look. I'm getting a nice, fresh, wet coat of the clay-based paint, which works really well on this type of a process. Getting that on there. Now to help adhere this, I'm gonna take my mister bottle and I'm gonna mist the ink side, the paint side of this inlay. With those indents side by side, I'm gonna place this on here. I'm gonna try and stick it into those indents. I do have a lot of wrinkles in this one. I don't mind the wrinkles. I actually really try and purposely get wrinkles in the paint inlays. I really like them. Then when you have it all adhered on there, you're gonna take your mister bottle and you're gonna spritz it again. That helps it adhere right onto the paint. Then the good tool is this IOD brayer, which is going to push that inlay into your paint. It's a little bit on the too soggy side, so you can suck up some of that moisture with a paper toweling. It doesn't have to be soggy wet, just wet. Now we're gonna let it dry. These two are ready to be pulled off. So this paint inlay is completely dry. It's been here for a while. Both of these are completely dry. We're going to mist them with the mister bottle. And you don't want them soaking wet, you just want them misted. And I like to take my hand and go over the top of it just to make sure that it's moist. You're gonna wait about 30 seconds. Make sure you mist all of the paper after you wait 30 seconds. And while you're waiting 30 seconds is you're making sure that this paper has got some nice wetness to it so that it doesn't stick to the project. And then you pull it back. This one was already used once, so it has a little bit of age to it. It also has some of the black from the last project I used it on, which gives it that vintage look. That's pretty cool. This one we're gonna pull back. You can see it's much darker than that one. This is the first time use, and this is the second time use. Same type of an inlay, but the second time you're gonna get a little bit more vintage, but it does work. And then this one, it's the first image, so it's nice and black. That's really fun. This breadboard, I'm going to use this honey stencil. This stencil is from WallCutz, and I will put the link below for if you order from the link, you'll save $5. So you can get your WallCutz stencils from that link. And we're gonna put it onto this board with a little DIY paint in black velvet using the JRV stencil brush. I'm gonna tape off the area I don't want to stencil down here on the bottom by the bee's tail. I don't want that. I'm gonna move it up slightly, making sure that I'm centered and straight. Then I'll go ahead and put some painter's tape on the two sides, just to hold it in place. Using the JRV stencil brush, I'll get a very little bit of paint on my brush and wipe most of it off. Then in a pouncing step, you're gonna pounce like this. Need a little bit more paint. It's important that you take all that wetness off or you'll have bleed through. Then you're gonna pounce your stencil brush up and down like this throughout the whole stencil. And it's kind of annoying, so I'm not gonna make you listen to that. When you use a stencil, there's all of these spaces, which has to be that way for a stencil. But you can take a little thin paintbrush, paint those slices in, and then it won't look like it was stenciled. It will look like it was hand lettered. So there's the word honey without those spaces in there. Now we're gonna do this farm fresh on the top. And as long as you use the same color as you stenciled with, it'll dry to the same color. There we go. That one no longer looks like a stencil. You can also do it on this bee. I think we might add a little bit of something to this bee. maybe a little bit of yellow, but I'm gonna go in here and fill in that line, that line. Let's connect his wings a little bit. I'm going to take some DIY Queen Bee and a small artist brush and go over the stripes on this bee. I want them to be yellow, and so I'm going over them with a little DIY paint. I'm not being very careful, and I'll show you in a little bit why I'm not being very careful, and adding over top of those black lines. Then I take liquid sunshine and I add it to 1/2 of the bee to kind of give him a little bit of shape, a little bit of roundness. If you add a highlight onto that side, it'll really help. Okay, when I painted that on, I could have been more careful, but I purposely wasn't so I could show you something. It's not perfect. So if you take your stencil and you lay it back down to where it needs to be, take your black paint and stencil over top of this. And you'll have a nice crisp bee. Look at how perfect he is. That's a trick for you. When you use a paint inlay, the paint inlay is paint, so it's going to smear when you put a top coat on it. These have dried for a few days, so they're nice and dried. I have the DIY Big Top on my brush, and I barely touch that surface and go straight across. I'm sealing in that paint inlay and not smearing it. If you're afraid of smearing it, you can use a spray sealer to do this part and make sure that you don't smear it. You're gonna get your first coat of Big Top on your project. The bristles of my brush are barely touching that project. You're gonna get your first coat on here and let it dry, and then you can come back and do a second coat to make sure you got everything covered. When it starts to dry, you can kind of see where you skipped because your brush is barely touching it. The key is let it dry for a few days and then barely touch that with your brush. You will smear it if you don't follow this process. It will smear. So here's plenty of Big Top on my brush. See, like I so barely touched it that it didn't even hit in this area, which is totally fine. We're gonna come back and give it a second dose. And you really just wanna go over it one time. Sometimes there might be a little bit of excess Big Top and you can go and clean that up, but only go over it one time. Sometimes you can do a second time depending on how light of a touch you have. We got that paint inlay all sealed up in there. And now we're gonna let them dry. When I order from WallCutz Stencil Company, I receive 2 free stencils. And this was one of the free ones that I received, and it's so cute. I thought this thing looked like a little where you could put your mail. So I stenciled the Oh Hello stencil on there. I'm going back and I'm cleaning up that stencil look so that it looks like this was hand lettered onto this box. And oh hello, you got bills or junk mail again. When using the DIY clay-based paint, it does come off with a baby wipe. So you can tell on the inside of this mail holder that I didn't have my even lines. And if I just go in with a baby wipe, I can clean that all up. And then I can also distress the edges of this box also and bring some of that natural wood back, giving it a more distressed, fun look. And this project is really turning out better than I thought it would. I kind of jumped all around in this video. I usually try to stay with one project, but it was a little difficult this time, and I know you guys just like me to get some videos out, so it was easier to get it recorded, get it done, and get it to you. I have this napkin that's really pretty. I took it apart, so it's only the one ply, and now I'm gonna cut it so it just fits this block. I have lines that are going on here, so I need to make sure that it's straight. I also have a butterfly that is right here, so I wanna make sure that butterfly is straight also. This is DIY's liquid patina, which is like a Mod Podge, and it will adhere this napkin to the board. We painted it pink because you want a light background underneath the napkin because it is so thin, it'll show right through. Put it down on that wet liquid patina and let it dry. We're gonna add something to this after it dries. When it's dry, you can take a piece of sandpaper and sand off those edges, and it gives you a nice clean line. When you have your edges all cleaned off and it's dry, you want to go back in with another coat of liquid patina to seal that napkin into place. And then let that dry. On a number of these little boards, I wanted to paint my flowers and bees on them. I did this in time lapse. This video would have been too long had I not done that. So I did post one of these in a shorts, and people did say that they wanted to see this process slowed down a bit. I will work on getting a regular video recorded with slowing this process down so that you can see how I paint the flowers and the bees. They are super, super cute, and they did turn out really nice on these 4 different signs that I had. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I really appreciate you stopping in and watching what I have for you today. Thank you, and again, if you haven't subscribed, please do so. Like and share my page. It really helps me in the end. Those are some of the things that you can do to help me out and to create more videos. If you like any of these products, please stop on over to thepaintedphotographer.com. And until next time, happy painting.